Is the coalition between the Liberals and the Nationals over, or at least past its use-by date? That's the question that many people are asking in the wake of the federal election, which saw a thumping defeat for the Liberal National Coalition, and saw the Labour Party winning in a landslide. In the wake of that defeat, it appeared that the coalition, at least for a time, disintegrated, as the Nationals pulled out of the coalition over disagreements about various policy matters. Now, of course, the exact nature of those disagreements has been slightly disputed, but it caused the coalition to briefly disintegrate. However, in no less than a week, the coalition then re-emerged, with the Liberals and the Nationals agreeing to ink a new agreement, with the Liberals acquiescing to the Nationals' demands. Now, you might be asking, what were those demands that were so controversial? Well, really, there were four key policy sticking points for the National Party. These included things such as nuclear energy, included things such as a future fund for regional areas, included things such as universal service coverages for mobile phones and the like in regional areas, and also included powers to break up supermarkets if they were to enter into a monopoly or a duopoly type scenario. Those were the four major demands, with another fifth demand possibly circulating in the background, whereby if the Liberals didn't immediately agree to those first four, the Liberals would be able to vote against the general coalition agreement, or at least against what the Liberal Party would want. Much as they did, for example, in relation to the Voice referendum, whereby the Nationals moved before the Liberals to come out against the Voice. Now, this of course, like I've indicated, caused the coalition to briefly disintegrate, as the Liberals couldn't get their act together to agree to those demands. Now, those demands weren't exactly unreasonable, because they were effectively a reiteration of the policy that the coalition took to the last election, and which it appears the Liberals were willing to go along with. So the whole debacle seems like it could have easily been avoided. Now, there appears to have been fault on both ends. On the one hand, the Nationals were really wanting an agreement to this relatively quickly. For example, Susan Lee only became leader 8 days before the coalition disintegrated, and 4 days before it disintegrated, Susan Lee's mother passed away, meaning there was a very compressed timeline. For their part, however, the Nationals indicated they were willing to give the Liberals time. It's just that the Liberals showed no sign whatsoever of making any form of speedy agreement, and potentially wanted to relitigate all of the issues from the election before coming up with an agreement, which indicated to the Nationals the Liberals were just going to drag their feet and then potentially string them along before turning around and deciding to not go along with those policy areas. Now, it does, however, raise the question of whether the coalition should really exist to begin with, or whether it would be better for the two parties to go it alone. And here I've seen some mixed feedback. On the one hand, I've seen many people assert that the Liberals have gone too far left, they've become too woke, so to speak, and they simply aren't good at carrying a message, and the Nationals would be better off being able to articulate their own case on their own terms. This would include perhaps deviating from the Liberals on things such as net zero or various other measures of social policy. Now, many of the people who seemingly are wanting this are wanting someone like Matt Canavan to lead the National Party as an independent entity. Another strand of the argument goes that the Nationals would then be in a better position to fully pursue the electorates that are competitive for it. They could potentially expand their regional base, potentially into some outer suburban areas. The Liberals, for their part, would be able to hone in on the message that would work in their electorates. For example, really focusing on seizing back some of the teal electorates such as Bradfield or Goldstein, which they've won for Tim Wilson, or Kooyong, or Wentworth, various areas like that might otherwise have been difficult for them to achieve if they were aligned with the Nationals and had to come up with that type of policy platform. Now, I can see some merit in that argument, i.e. it can be good to segment your audience. Segmenting your audience can help you communicate more effectively to those two discrete sets of individuals. However, there is a drawback. Rather, I think they lost because they failed to articulate a clear policy message, and on policies that matter to those areas, such as Labour's superannuation tax hike, they failed to communicate. Whenever you heard Liberal Party members talking about things such as that, it wasn't even clear they knew what they were talking about, which was not exactly convincing. Basically, the Liberals shied away from fighting the fight on issues that actually mattered, and should matter to all Australians. After all, a move to effectively seize wealth from superannuation funds, well, that should obviously be of interest and of concern to all Australians, because that would impose a tax on unrealised capital gains, and that would kick in notionally at a threshold of $3 million in the superannuation fund. But let's face it, once they've started that tax, it is going to expand to everyone, either due to bracket creep because the $3 million is not indexed, meaning that when Gen Z retire, well, they're going to be caught up in it, or just through outright lowering it, which is what the Greens want to do. It's going to catch up everyone and expand, and it sets a terrible precedent. The Liberal Party should have been fighting that fight, but they weren't. And that, to some extent, is why they lost in those electorates. In the last election, the Liberal Party wasn't really fighting on many right-wing causes. There wasn't anything really right-wing about their platform. Rather, they just failed to articulate a case, and Labour lied repeatedly, and they failed to rebut those lies. I've talked about all of this in a prior video. The Nationals, for their part, managed to hold on to all of their seats, although they did, of course, fail to win back one from an independent. But that independent really does seem to be focusing on regional issues, so that to some extent is very akin to the Nationals in many areas. Regardless, I don't think the message segmentation was the major issue at the last election. I think it was the failure to articulate a message at all. Then we've got the issue that the Liberals and the Nationals are very unlikely to be able to get a majority in their own right. Now, of course, it has occurred in the past. The Liberals under John Howard were able to get a majority in their own right. But that is really not a frequent occurrence. And when John Howard managed to achieve that, he still kept the coalition together because he knew that that major majority was probably not going to last in future elections. And this means that if the Liberals and the Nationals ever want to form government, they're going to need to form an agreement between themselves at some future point. And this then would raise the issue that if not in a coalition now, when people are voting for either party, it's more difficult for them to know what they're actually going to be getting when that coalition is formed after the election. Are the Nationals going to need to go back on some of their policy positions? Are the Liberals? How are they going to reconcile this if or when they were to be elected? The coalition helps to give voters more certainty about what they are getting. Furthermore, it helps to give both parties more resources to be able to fight an election, and it stops the two parties competing against one another, which makes it a bit more efficient to fight that election. Now, of course, that unified policy platform does have some disadvantages. For example, in Nationals areas, so regional locations, the push toward net zero has some downsides, because it clearly raises issues in relation to what's going to go on with energy policy and where one is even putting the renewables to begin with, and whether, for example, areas of relatively good land are going to be soaked up with things such as wind turbines and solar panels. It also raises the question of various costs, and whether, for example, we go all in on net zero zealotry and bring in taxes, for example, on things like methane emissions from livestock, which obviously would be highly detrimental to farmers. The Nationals, of course, want some slightly more conservative policies than the Liberals are agreeing with, and this may cost the Liberals some votes in perhaps teal-like electorates, but I dare say the Liberals had bigger problems than the Nationals' policy platform at the last election. Now, of course, issues such as climate change are live issues in areas like Bradfield or Kooyong or Goldstein or Wentworth or various areas like that. However, the front and centre issues of prosecuting the case over things such as Division 296 or things such as bracket creep were bigger issues. The Liberals' abject failure to lock in on reducing the lowest marginal tax rate was likely to be a significantly bigger issue than any concern about net zero in many of those teal electorates. Similarly, with their failure to address bracket creep, it would have been an easy solution in the budget reply speech for Peter Dutton to come out and say, the Labour Party has not gone far enough by reducing the lowest marginal tax rate. We, if we were elected, are going to index tax brackets and address bracket creep once and for all. Instead, Peter Dutton prevaricated. He vacillated over what his policy was going to be, which is symptomatic of how he dealt with the election, broadly speaking. In short, I don't think the coalition is why the Liberal Party struggled. I think the Liberal Party struggled because of its own issues that were not intrinsic to there being a coalition agreement, but rather were due to their failure to articulate a clear message at all, let alone a clear message that resonated. And there were clear areas of common ground that would have resonated with all audiences, but that they failed to articulate entirely. These, to be clear, include things such as tax policy, where the Liberals dropped the ball. So therefore, I don't think the underlying problem was that there was a coalition. And I don't think the coalition needs to break up, but I can see some arguments in favour of it. I think the two parties would be better off together and I actually think the Liberals might be better off listening a bit more to the Nationals and articulating a better policy position. But let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. Do you think the coalition is over, and do you think it's past its use by date, or do you think the coalition needs to be maintained? Let me know what you think in the comments below.